It's going to be a real nightmare for your opponents. Today, you're going to learn how to destroy your opponents quickly using your trickiest chess piece, the knight, in 5 popular openings. Coming in at number 1 is the bishop's opening, a truly powerful and universal choice that works well from beginner level all the way up to grandmaster play. It starts off calm, but things quickly heat up. After white develops the bishop early, black responds by attacking your central pawn. You don't panic. You let black capture the central pawn, inviting them in. Now it's time to challenge their centralized knight. At this point, the black knight has already done too much. It's overworked and would probably rather sit next to the chessboard. But unfortunately for black, they now have to defend their central pawn as well. Black plays pawn to d6, which appears to support the knight and cover the center. But now, as promised, here comes the nightmare. You boldly sacrifice your knight by jumping right into the heart of black's position, attacking the f7 pawn with your knight, followed by the bishop. The f7 square is a major weak spot, especially early in the game, and this sacrifice opens up chaos for the opponent. Now black is in serious trouble. Their king cannot escape safely, because if they move the king to safety, they'll lose the queen sitting on d8. But if they try to keep the queen protected, then you simply throw your bishop out. This bishop now delivers a skewer, a deadly tactic, and due to that skewer, black's queen falls, and with it, the entire game. The second opening on our list is the Vienna Gambit, a sharp, aggressive line perfect for catching opponents off guard. You boldly sacrifice your pawn, because as we like to say, good things come to those who bait. If your opponent takes the pawn, which looks tempting, that's already a mistake. You now push your central pawn forward, gaining space and control. Suddenly, your opponent realizes something painful. Their knight has no good squares to go to. It can't jump to one side because your queen dominates the diagonal. It also can't go to the central squares because your knight covers both of them. Black is running out of options. Sure, they could simply retreat and try again in the next game, but not everyone likes to give up. So they might try to resist by playing queen to a7, pinning your pawn, and also putting pressure on it. But now you respond with a symmetrical move, queen to e2, defending the pawn, and, at the same time, renewing your attack on the poor trapped knight. Now the knight is truly sad. Out of ideas, it packs its bags and quietly retreats home. After that, you bring out your knight to f3, continuing your development while black is starting to look stuck. They can't develop their kingside knight, which means they're far from completing their development. So what do? Naturally, they might try pawn to d6, offering a pawn trade. This also opens the possibility of trading queens, and they hope to equalize into a balanced position. But this is no ordinary line. This is a nightmare variation. Now once again, we bring in our trickiest chess piece, the bishop, unleashing pressure. The queen must move out of the way. But then, suddenly, comes the shocker. You sacrifice your knight right on c7. The next move? A discovered check. Their king is under attack, and in the confusion, you grab the queen and walk away with a winning position. The next one is probably the most satisfying chess opening trap you could ever play. This happens in the Ponziani opening. You begin by controlling the center and baiting your opponent with a central pawn, let them capture that pawn, and then you respond with pawn to d5, directly challenging their knight. Once the knight retreats, you recapture the central pawn, and now the material is balanced again. At this point, black often plays pawn to d6 to attack your knight and open the diagonal for their dark squared bishop. But it's a mistake. You immediately respond with bishop to b5, launching a strong counterattack. If black blocks with their bishop, you just capture it, and your bishop is safely protected by your knight. Saving the position would cost them their queen. If black tries pawn to c6 instead, you capture it right away, even if it means sacrificing your knight on a 5, because your next attack will be crushing. Black should never capture the knight. If they do, pawn takes on b7 is devastating. It's a discovered check, threatens the rook, and leads to promotion. Totally losing for black. Even trying to trade on c6 doesn't work. You bring in your knight, which lands deep in their position, attacking everything and securing an easy win. Now, if you're up against a stronger opponent, they might come up with a clever idea, a queen to b6. At first glance, this looks like a simple attack on your bishop and possibly the pawn on c6. But then you realize it's not really a threat. You just continue with pawn takes b7, delivering a discovered check with the bishop, and you're still threatening to capture the rook and promote your pawn. You're thinking, this is game over. But then your opponent surprises you with another strange-looking move, king to d8. But now you have to be extremely careful. Your opponent is setting a trap. They're tempting you to capture the rook and promote your pawn to a queen, which looks completely winning at first glance. But if you fall for it, it's actually a huge blunder. Why? Because after you promote, Black immediately plays queen takes on f2, and it's checkmate in one move. That's why I said earlier, queen to b6 is a very sneaky and dangerous idea. So instead of promoting, the correct move here is to capture the pawn on f7 with your knight, delivering a check. Now, thanks to your bishop controlling the diagonal, the black king is forced to move to e7. And here comes the final blow. You bring in your third knight. Yes, the third one. It jumps into the position with a royal fork, attacking the king and queen at the same time. At this point, the game is simply over. You win decisively. This time, you're playing as black, and the trap unfolds against one of the most famous openings in chess, the Ruy Lopez. You start off solid, developing your pieces naturally. But then, all of a sudden, you jump your kingside knight forward to g4, creating immediate tension. White sees the knight and decides to chase it. That's when you strike with a clever move, pawn to h5. This is the classic fishing pole trap. An old school idea, but even today, it's surprisingly effective. In fact, it's still White's most common move in this position to capture that seemingly loose knight on g4. But that turns out to be a terrible mistake. That knight was high-calorie, full of tactical poison. After you recapture with your h-pawn, things begin to unravel for White. You're now threatening their knight on f3, and more importantly, you've opened up the h-file, a direct highway for your rook to join the attack. At this point, White has to move their knight, but they're in big trouble. The knight can't go to g5 because your queen controls that square, so whether the knight goes to e1 or h2, it doesn't matter. You're about to unleash a deadly battery. You bring your queen out to h4, forming a direct alignment with your rook along the h-file, and now White has no way to defend. On your next move, you bring your queen even closer, and it's checkmate on h1. If White tries to run away or make space, perhaps with pawn to f3, you simply lock the door with another pawn move, reinforcing the trap, and as soon as that knight moves off, it's over. Your queen slides to h1, checkmate. This is the fishing pole trap in action, and it shows just how dangerous it can be to grab what looks like a free knight too early. A calm start for black turns into a sudden knockout, and your opponent never saw it coming. The next opening is, let's just say, very interesting. We're talking about the Scotch opening, a solid line that can suddenly spiral into chaos, if your opponent isn't careful. It starts off normally. Your opponent captures your central pawn, and now they expect you to recapture immediately. But instead, you surprise them. Your knight suddenly leaps in the opposite direction, heading toward g5. It looks strange, almost like you're playing wild freestyle chess. And after black plays pawn to h6, your response makes them even more suspicious. You sacrifice your knight right on f7, handing it over for seemingly no reason. This is a brilliant tactical trap. After the sacrifice, you bring your light-squared bishop to c4 with check. This puts immediate pressure on the exposed king. At this point, black's most natural and most common move is to slide the king back to e8. But that's a losing blunder. Why? Because now you finish the game with a near scholar's mate, an elegant and deadly setup. Even though the king can technically try to escape, it's only delaying the inevitable. There's no safe square, no coordination in black's position, and no defense against what's coming. You deliver checkmate shortly after. Simple, clean, and brutal. All of it began with a knight that looked like it was galloping off course. But in reality, it was setting a perfect trap. Thanks for watching.